This is the Brew World Order Podcast.
Welcome to the Brew World Order Podcast. My name is Mike Curtin. If you haven't subscribed yet, come aboard, laddies, and join the gang. This is episode number 37, and in this episode, I sit down with Tyler Jones, co-owner of Black Hog Brewing Company in Oxford, Connecticut. Tyler talks to me about how he met his two partners, what to look for when finding a distribution company, and how they came up with the name for their brewery, Black Hog Brewing. Speaking of Black Hog, that reminds me of my favorite nursery rhyme, This Little Pig. You all know it. This little pig went to the market. This little pig picked up some beer. That same little pig went wee 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 all the way home, sat back, cracked open a beer, and enjoyed this podcast. I mean, that's how I remember it. Hey guys, I'm Mike Curtin. This is the Brew World Order Podcast, and today I'm with Tyler Jones, co-owner of Black Hog Brewing Company in Oxford, Connecticut. Brothers Jason and Tom Sobocinski were very big into the food industry. Jason received a master's degree in gastronomy from BU, and not long after started working at Formaggio Kitchen in Cambridge, where he learned a lot about cheese. He moved back to New Haven, where he opened his own place, Casey's Formaggery Bistro. Brother Tom got involved and instantly fell in love. They wound up opening the cheese truck together, and it had become one of the top food trucks in New Haven, Connecticut. Tyler Jones had always been into brewing from his early days at college, where he had stumbled upon a homebrewing kit in his apartment closet. Brew after brew, he knew this is what he wanted to do with his life. So after graduating from the University of New Hampshire, he attended the Master Brewers program at UC Davis. After that, Tyler got to work, working at Smutty Nose before landing a job at Portsmouth as the assistant brewer alongside Todd Mott, before ultimately becoming the head brewer at Portsmouth. But deep down, Tyler always wanted to open his own place. Tom and Jason became friendly with Tyler Jones through his wife Rachel, who had been a friend of their family. The three of the great minds got together, and over time one thing led to another, and they decided they had all the pieces they needed to open a successful brewery. The trio brought the former Calvary Brewing Company in an Oxford industrial park, and in 2014, Black Hog was opened for business. And today I'm with the Lord of Liquid himself, Tyler Jones. Tyler, thank you so much for being with me, man.
Well, thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. So, you had worked in many different breweries, but obviously never your own until owning Black Hog. What was the biggest change for you as far as brewing went, and like putting your heart into your beer?
The thing that I really loved about the Portsmouth Brewery and eventually becoming the head brewer there was just total recipe development freedom, where I was able to brew 70, 80 different styles a year, and just be rotating through and just put them on tap, not have to worry about the whole distribution chain of it.
Right.
I always kind of mention like brewing is 50% art, 50% science. But then once opening Black Hog Brewing Company, it had kind of morphed into 50% art, 50% science, and 50% business, which I don't know how we got to 150, but that was kind of the biggest change for me, is trying to really figure out the business side on top of keeping the beer super fresh and interesting along the way.
Right. You were open for about, I guess, 6 years or so before this whole COVID thing hit. How harshly did it affect your business?
Yeah, I mean, COVID's been crazy. The one thing that we got lucky, we were in, like you mentioned, we opened up in Oxford, Connecticut, which is, you ever been to Connecticut? It's in the middle of nowhere, Connecticut.
Yeah.
It's nice and scenic.
I love it.
We were focusing very hard on distribution because of that. Our tasting room was doing some business for us, and making the fun money on the extra fun money on the side. But we were basically forced into having to put money into a new canning line, and like that did high quality packaged beer that was shelf stable and DO meter, and like really making sure that our packaged beer going out the door was super fresh. Because that's where the bulk of the people trying Black Hog was either at their local bars, which again, COVID's a totally different story on that.
Right.
But out of the package store, so that's kind of our saving grace, I think, where we weren't 100% focused, and basically we didn't. Not that we didn't need it, but we can make by with just going to distro, and we were set up to go to distro. So that's kind of how we've been getting through COVID, is just everything is going into cans and going out the door. Whether it's to a distributor, or we actually started a statewide delivery because they opened that up for us, which has been super helpful. So we have a guy that goes out every Wednesday and every Friday, going out just delivering beer straight from the brewery, straight to your doorstep.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So during that process of opening your brewery, I mean, you guys all got together and decided on it, and from basically purchasing and coming up with your business plan and everything, what was the most challenging part for you before you actually opened the doors to the public?
I mean, again, I came in a little on the naive side on the business, which was kind of the most challenging part for me. But luckily I had really good business partners that are business savvy and were able to get Black Hog to where it is today. The truth is the name was really hard in the beginning. I mean, we thought up this great idea. We had it, and then everything we Googled was already a brewery's name somewhere, you know?
Right.
So that's kind of where Black Hog originated from, where Jason, you know, as a chef by trade and has his in the food world, and he loves throwing parties. The food of choice he likes to do for that large crowd is a whole hog roast. And the hog he likes to use is the Berkshire hog.
Right.
Which has jet black hair, really great fat marbling. It's like made to do these pig roasts. And the Berkshire hog's nickname is Black Hog. So it's Black Hog Brewing Company kind of originated from that friends and family and food and sharing of beers together.
Gotcha. I'm curious how this kind of went down. I know you were introduced through your wife to your partners. How did that whole thing kind of come together where it was like, yeah, let's do this. Let's open a brewery together? Yeah,
my wife, Rachel, her dad, or my now father-in-law, Steve, and Big Tom, as he's known, because Tom Sobocinski is officially Tom Jr. because his father's named Tom.
Right.
So my father-in-law, Steve, and Big Tom worked together in the 70s. So they grew up just knowing each other. My brother-in-law played soccer against Jason in high school, you know, back and forth. Still to this day, Jason's parents and my in-laws get together and they have dinner once a month.
Awesome.
So they're, you know, real good friends growing up. Right. And when I was dating Rachel, and, you know, starting to get serious, you know, we hadn't proposed yet, but the writing was on the wall. My father-in-law was like, you need to meet Jason because he talks about cheese like you talk about beer. You know, he's not a beer guy, but just like with the passion and the understanding and able to talk about it like fluently. And so I went and visited Casius. I was dropped off some 22-ounce beers that I brought down to share with the family and dropped them off at the bar. He happened not to be in at the time. And but when I got home, I got a Facebook message from Tom. He's like, hey, thanks so much for dropping off those beers. I was hoping to try to run into you while you were down here. But, you know, I'd love to come up to Portsmouth and kind of shadow you for a day or two and kind of see how the pros are doing it. And that kind of sparked in my head. I was like, were they looking to maybe open a brewery or brew pub or something? So I reached back out. They're like, yeah, we were kind of tossing around the idea. And I was like, well, I'm kind of tossing around the idea to move my family to Connecticut because I kind of want to have some family support for my son at this point. We didn't realize we were pregnant with our second.
Right.
And, you know, that Facebook message turned into an email, turned into multiple phone calls and business plans, and we just got running from there.
Awesome. So how did you guys go about finding the capital to fund this business? We
have a bunch of investors that came in, and they, you know, they're all officially partners in Black Hog and sharing all the proceeds as we go along. But basically we use the same plan that Jason has used to open all of his other business, where, you know, kind of having friends and family and, you know, buy into shares. And there were some overlaps to some of his other businesses, but I mean, along the way I had my father and my father-in-law are all invested in the company. And, just the big thing was just getting friends and family together and having them believe in our dream. Right.
What's something you never thought you were going to have to deal with when being the owner of a brewery?
Yeah, I mean, I knew, you know, the business side, you're going to have to deal with distributors, but I didn't realize how in-depthly I'm dealing with distributors at this point. It's just there's a lot of moving parts, you know, getting beer out the door. Never mind getting it sold on the shelf once it hits the package store. That's something coming from Portsmouth Brewery. I'd make a beer, I'd put it in a serving tank, and I'd go upstairs and I'd sit next to the people drinking it and talk to them about it. And that was it. That's all I had to worry about. And making sure that 85 feet of beer line was clean and that I could make sure that they were enjoying the beer. With Black Hog and going to distribution is, I have complete control until it leaves my warehouse dock. So then it's like, all right, so now I got to worry about all these different distributors, how they're keeping the beer in their warehouses.
Right.
Then, like, once that beer is made it to a package store, is that beer in the cooler? Is it on the shelf? Like, on the shelf. Draft line, too, is something where people have to clean their lines to make the beer taste good. And there's so many more layers of control that I just don't really have that I used to have doing in the brew pub land, which is, I've learned to live with. And distribution wise, actually we shrank since COVID hit, obviously, but we're going to, eventually we have been in the past, we distributed from Maine all the way down to DC. It's like something really hit the fan. I can literally jump in my truck, drive there and fix it. I still kind of in the back of my head have that mental control of saying, hey, if I really need to, I can get in a car and fix it,
Right. You have been talking a lot about distribution. Is there one big thing that you would tell people that are dealing with distributors, like one big thing to look for when looking for a distributor?
It's really kind of depending what type of brewery you're opening. When we bought Calvary, like we walked into a brewery that was installed and running that had 4 30-barrel fermenters and a 30-barrel bright. So I was like, well, we're making some big volumes of beer here, so we have to have distributors.
Right.
We have to have the distribution partners to make sure that the people that come to our tasting room are drinking fresh beer. Because if you're making 30 barrels of beer and trying to self-distribute it over multiple different brands, it's just such a bigger nightmare because you just can't. You can't. It's hard to get through it quickly enough to make sure that every ounce of beer being sold is fresh. That's the double-edged sword of the distributor. They help with the volume and getting the beer out, and they deliver the beer for you rather than us as a company having to go door to door, dropping off one keg, writing one invoice, and then at the end of the month trying to track down these 843 invoices that are overdue, and then go back and get our kegs back from those spots. It's just now it goes to a warehouse at a distribution center. The distributors take care of all that for us. So that's kind of the convenience of having the distributor.
Right.
Then they have all of that in place. They're hitting these bars multiple times a week to make sure that all your restaurants and package stores are getting the freshest beer possible. That's the advantage of the distributor. They're able to help you get your volume up. But if you're starting in a small place and not trying to make huge batches, self-distribution works great. But, you just gotta, because you are making that better margin on those cases or kegs going to the stores, but you're selling less of them. So it's kind of that.
Right. You're not.
That doesn't the other really what you're looking at, what you're looking to do as a brewery.
Right. You're not really paying the middleman, but you're putting less out there.
Yeah, and also you think about just labor costs too. Like if you're self-distributing, you're running your own distributor, so you have to have the trucks, you have to have the guys physically driving those around and dropping them off and picking up those kegs and pulling old beer off the shelves. But it's just the labor side of it. You're adding 1 or 2 people just to do your distribution of your beer.
Right. Gotcha. I know you came across a lot of people. You worked at 3 different breweries altogether. Who would you say inspired you the most in the beer industry?
Obviously, Todd Mott is kind of, he was my Obi-Wan. Really getting into the business. And
love the reference, by the way.
He taught me I was a chemical engineering undergrad. I went to UC Davis and learned all the science and all the technical stuff that went into brewing.
Right.
But Todd Mott he has his master's in ceramics and came to brewing very on the artistic side. And basically the way he explained it was to make clay, you mix certain types of dirt together with a certain type of water and you knead it for a certain amount of time and then you bake it in the kiln for, and then to make beer, you do certain types of malts with a certain type of water and you have certain types of hops and then you ferment it at a certain, it's good. He was looking at it, that kind of how do you mix stuff together. And he really helped me tremendously on my recipe development side of my brewing world.
Right.
And taught me a ton of stuff you can learn from a book. You know, brewing is a trade. You got to learn from a master, really, kind of to get the ins and outs of making beer high quality and delicious, for sure. So Tom Rod is definitely my number one on the list. But number two is Dave Yarrington, the former executive brewer of Smutty Nose. He really taught me how to be a brewer in a distribution like large scale brewing world, and how to look at stuff, and focusing a lot on the packaging and like learning about DO levels and quality control and things you can do, like ways to implement these like crazy brew pub techniques to how to they don't directly translate when you scale up. You know, how to think like a pub brewer, but then be able to scale those up to larger batches and, you know, get more efficiencies out of stuff. And so he's definitely my number two, would be Dave Yarrington.
Awesome. Is there a defining moment for you that kind of like after you opened your brewery where things kind of like hit and you knew things were going in the right direction?
When we first opened, like, the IPA was, I mean, it still is. Hazy IPAs, New style IPAs, they're still the number one seller. But my father-in-law, being, you know, one of my investors, one of my favorite things, I used to bring him the Smutty Nose Old Brown down when I came down to visit and to enjoy with him. He loved that beer.
Right. And
him being one of the investors, I was like, don't worry, Steve, I'll make sure to have a brown ale for you in the rotation. And I thought it'd just be something I'd be making every once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
But then the Granola Brown, with that beer, when that started taking over Newcastle lines everywhere, and we started making like 60-barrel batches of it, and I was like, holy cow, this is crazy. Like, this was the first beer that like took off for us. It was like to see like, oh, people like my beer, and people actually want it, and people are ordering it and reordering it.
Right.
So that was a really cool experience that I got to just recently relive probably like a year or two ago when we launched Hazy, our CT style CT style juicy Hazy IPA. And that was another one where Granola Brown had always been I blew my mind how much Granola Brown we were making, and now we're making just as much hazy, and it's slowly going to be more hazy than Granola Brown very shortly, which is, you know, that was fun. But just like, not talking about specific brands, just like the business in general. When we had our 1 year anniversary party, like at the brewery, you know, we've been open for a year. The tasting room had been working pretty well, and we decided to say, hey, you know, we're in an industrial park, you know, backed up to the woods. We just put up some tags with ropes on them and just blocked off this whole back area of pavement. And
right.
said, hey, we're going to throw ourselves a party. And like, so many people showed up, and we had, you know, like kegs outside on jockey boxes, serving pints out there, and just threw a really big old party. And just the amount of people that showed up, and everyone was having such a great time. I was like, all right, this is great. Like, people are into this. People were looking for this, and, you know, we're hitting all the right notes right now. So that was
right.
That 1 year anniversary was a big one for sure.
Yeah. Let's hope that we could do something like that again very, very soon, you know?
Yes.
That'd be
the end of August is officially when we do our anniversary parties.
Right.
I mean, we opened in Cinco de Mayo was the first day we walked through. So May 5th,
right.
2014. But, you know, we walked into what was Calvary Brewing Company. So all the tanks were empty. There was no beer on, you know, the bar wasn't, there was nothing. So, it took us a while to dial in the recipe, make enough beers, get out the distro, get our tasting room built out. So by August, we were kind of like, all right, we're ready to start really like saying, hey, we're open.
Right.
And so August had the 30th is officially, I think it's the 30th or 31st. One of the two is Tom's birthday. So it's like, hey, let's just throw ourselves a big grand opening party on my birthday. You know, like, all right, let's do it. And that's when it just like blew up. And it's like, all right, this is great. So that was fun for sure.
Yeah. It seems like it was so far away when you can actually do things like that, you know?
I know. It'll come back.
Yeah,
I can't wait.
I know.
Can't wait.
Sorry, I'm getting emotional over here. Pardon me.
No.
So, how important for you is a mental break from your work?
We started, 2000, moved down to Connecticut. I was living with the in-laws because we didn't have a house, so we just moved in with the in-laws with my oldest son and my wife pregnant with our second. My second child was actually born while we were living there.
Right.
And I was just working crazy hours, and very focused on the brewery for the first, good 2 years. It's just having that mental break, I'm learning, is super important. My mental break has been changing throughout the years, kind of varying from running, because my father-in-law did a lot of marathons when he was younger, so I used to go running with him, which helped. But most recently, I picked up disc golf.
Disc golf, okay.
Disc golf right now is my mental break, and it is amazing.
Gotcha. What do you think for you has been the biggest change in the last 5 years in the brewing industry?
I mean, talk pre-COVID first and foremost. Like when we started in 2014, breweries were like a brewery tasting room was a fun destination place for people to go check out,
Right.
And everyone wanted to be like, I want to sit next to the fermenter and just be in a brewery while I'm drinking a beer. And that's kind of when we started, that was the peak. So that's kind of what we went for. We went for having that tasting room, just we set up tables next to the glycol feed of the back of our fermenters, and people hung out and they felt like they were just drinking in the brewery with us, which was
right.
And then literally every brewery, even not even brew pubs that opened up after us, they opened a really amazing air conditioned restaurant that had a fire pit and an indoor fireplace and bocce courts, and then all of a sudden, oh yeah, there's a brewery attached to this place.
Right.
People were opening these big. They weren't opening brewery destination locations. They were opening a really
a restaurant spa with a brewery attached.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the stone fireplaces and stuff. It was just the stuff that was opening was just holy cow! People are sinking cash into this, into that side, and that. In hindsight, 2020. I mean, yeah, they were focused on the customer experience and how making their customers as comfortable as possible within their space.
Right.
Because that makes them stay longer and that makes them drink more beer. And it all made sense. But I think that was kind of the biggest push, the change for me, where it's the breweries that opened more recently and they were very focused on that. The restaurant side of it. I don't want to say the tasting room side of it.
Right.
Making it as close to a comfortable restaurant experience for people as possible. Okay. Post COVID, that's all out the window now. And again, I'm like I mentioned earlier, super lucky that we were forced into making high quality beer for distribution, and that's what's saving us right now. And there's a lot of people that are scrambling trying to figure out distribution. That had, there's breweries that opened that were just, I want to make beer for my taps only and sell cans out the back door in crowlers,
Right,
and
yeah.
they were doing amazing. And they were probably making more money than we were at that point. Everything was direct sales, and there was no having to, there was people lined up every weekend picking up cases and cases, and they were good, So now having that change of the COVID thing is really, I'm curious to see what's going to happen as breweries open into the future right now. I think it's kind of really interesting to see how people what people learn from this COVID experience, and definitely outside seating. People are going to have a lot of outside seating.
Yeah, for sure.
They open
for sure. Yeah, it will be interesting to see that change again. I mean, ultimately, the keeping it simple is just hey, we're going to focus on quality of beer, and this is a brewery, rather than opening a restaurant, because now, it kind of changes the whole dynamic now with this whole situation. So it's kind of crazy. What was this? I love this question, but I especially, this would be interesting hearing from you. I'm sure because you got into homebrewing, at a young age. What was your gateway beer into the craft beer world?
Easy. Mean Green, baby. Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. That was the
you are not the only person to say that. I've heard that numerous times.
It's just, you're drinking Keystone Lights at a keg party, and someone has this crazy stubby neck green label beer. You're like, what is that thing? You taste it, and it was just
Yeah.
citrus and pine and just like what is going on? This is amazing.
Right.
You know, and that was definitely my gateway beer. I mean, I dabbled in the number 9 from Magic Hat for sure, and then we started doing the blind 9s. We did the blind space half that with some number 9 and 50-50 blends, and then from there it's just kind of like just realizing all the West Coast stuff with Stone and
right.
I mean, yeah, Sierra Nevada is like the OG. I mean, they're my definitely gateway into craft.
Yeah, they're great.
And
this is my first time asking this because I figure I would ask a real hardcore brewer. What would be one home brewing tip that you'd want to pass on to somebody?
I mean, the obvious is take good notes.
Right.
The thing is, like, if you like a beer, and you love how a beer is like, you make this beer and it's great, literally make it again. Does it taste the same? If it does, you're doing stuff right. Like that's the big thing where it's like
consistency.
There's so many variables within brewing that you have control over that you need to be able to replicate. I mean, my brewing professor at UC Davis it's Davis, it's wine country up there, and UC Davis has a huge viticulture program.
Right.
And the brewing program when I was there was still small and kind of off campus and not as big as it is now. But my brewing professor was like, to make good wine, you have to have good grapes, because you're basically smashing the grapes. If you have a bad growing year, like, it's going to come out in the wine. There's no way to fix it along the way.
Right.
He's like, to make good beer, you have to have a good brewer, because, you can take inferior ingredients, but using them the right way, blending them with other ingredients, getting more extract out of your malts, like taking this year's crop year with the different ratios of alpha acids and myrcenes and all the different oil components and changing how you use those within the boil and or within dry hopping. I mean, you just have all this control, like yeast fermentation temperature, what yeast strain you're using. I mean, there's just, as a brewer, you have complete control from the time you're starting to crack that grain to the finish, to the glass, like,
right.
Make the beer and make it better. But because there's so many variables, there's so many steps along the way you can screw up too. So my biggest thing for a home brewer would be like, you made this beer, like you and your buddies love it. Like if you can make it 3 more times in a row and make it taste the exact same every time, now you're getting somewhere. That's where it comes down to making sure you can produce quality, but also consistency.
Right. Consistent deliciousness.
Yeah, that's the key.
Of course. So what's some advice you would give to somebody that wanted to open their own brewery?
Put in a drive-through. Yeah, I mean...
Would it be a bad idea?
No, I mean, that's buy an old Wendy's and keep the drive-through. It'd be really interesting to see how, like, if the laws stay the same or change or back. I mean, I always plan a brewery for expansion, which I've learned is kind of, I did from the beginning, which is helpful. But like, if you're like, hey, I need to upgrade my I'm installing a glycol chiller. I want to start with four 7-barrel fermenters. Size that, like, don't buy the chiller that's going to run 4 7-barrel fermenters. Buy the chiller the next size, or if you can afford it, next 2 sizes up, so that you can easily run those 4 tanks. And then if you need to put more tanks in, you're just dropping new glycol and putting tanks in versus having to do a whole big expansion.
Right.
So always be planning for expansion, but don't. And then also number 2 would be don't discount distribution at this point, where it's having a quality product off your tap lines is important, but being able to get it to the masses in more than one way versus your taps and or selling growlers. Which I mean, growlers are a whole nother story. Don't talk about those yet, but yeah,
right.
Plan for packaging from day one and being able to know how to put beer into cans or bottles or quality wise. That's the big one for me.
Okay. And did you happen to have a funny story for us?
There's so many.
Good. That's great.
Yeah. Talked about like brewing and recipe development and all that, and brew pub versus packaging facilities and different size vessels. So I mean, one of the, you're always learning. The big thing is always a learning curve, and you're learning something new. So I had this one beer that I thought up at the Portsmouth Brewery, which I thought to do like an imperial winter rye. So it's a 55% rye malt.
Right.
Obviously, I didn't put any flake product in it or to help with any sort of runoff. But so I did this really because I wanted a big sticky mouthfeel from the rye, some spice note. Thought it'd be great for wintertime. So I made this imperial rye beer that I mashed in, and then as I started running off, I got maybe 3 of the 7 barrels I was trying to get out of it, and my mash tun just stuck so hard. All that gluten just stuck to the bottom, like wasn't able to get any liquid through.
Ugh.
I underletted it. I mean, the Portsmouth Brewery system was a 92. I think it was a 92. JB Northwest, like single outlet gravity mash tun, so it was very, very simple. So back, underletting wasn't as effective as I really wanted it to, just basically added more water into the system. And it just, after what should have been a 2-hour runoff, after about 8 hours, I was like, I'm not getting any more out of this mash tun. So I, ended up diluting down my wort that I had in the kettle, boiling it, and turning it into a session rye IPA. But that still left me with this mash tun full of sticky malt. And
right.
I didn't realize how much water as well. So mashing out, trying to get that out of the mash tun is I don't know if you've ever been to Portsmouth Brewery, the mash tun's up on a platform. So you come from the cellar, which is in the basement, up these spiral staircases, and you go up another 4 steps up to the mash tun door. And we hook the slide in to the mash tun door, and the mash would hit the slide, roll down and into trash cans, and we'd roll out in the back alleyway. So in this case, I cracked the door, and it was like a little bit of water started coming out on the manway, which is like normal. I was expecting it because of how thick and how crappy of a runoff I was having.
Right.
So I kind of let it drip dry until it stopped running. And then I tried to do this big, quick, open door, put the slide in, and I just got hit in the chest with hot, sticky, wet mash. So I jump out of the way, and the whole mash tun just emptied out the door, straight down those spiral staircases, and just flooded the basement with wet, sticky mash.
God.
So after my 8-hour runoff, I had to spend another 6 to 8 hours literally just cleaning, getting all that, hand shoveling the mash, bringing it up the staircase, putting it it was a nightmare.
Oh, that sounds...
Learning experience, right? Learning experience.
Yeah. Funny now. I'm sure then it was very agitating.
Yes, my 8-hour day was a solid 19-hour day. But,
yeah, for sure. So I have a little segment called Quick Fire 5. 5 quick questions, beer related. Ready?
Okay. Hit it.
Awesome. One of your beers that you would recommend someone try?
Gorilla Brown for sure. I mean, it's been our flagship forever. It's a beautiful brown ale. And then if you're into hazy New England styles, I mean, try our hazy. It's unique to the style, and it's cleaner and crisper than a lot of the hazies, but still has that beautiful juiciness to it.
Gotcha. Favorite brewery other than your own?
Ooh,
it's tough.
A fast fire. Sierra Nevada. Just because it has my desert island gateway beer being made there for sure. I mean, there's so many good breweries out there, so it's really hard to pick up favorites. But that's my quick fire answer to that.
You got it. Favorite style of beer?
The one in my hand.
Which is?
Beer is so situational for me, so I really enjoy food and beer pairings, drinking seasonally. So there's a lot of things that go into deciding what I'm drinking. So
right.
It's hard to say that because I drink them all. And it just depends what I'm eating and what beer I just drank and what time of year it is. So that's why it's an easy one to just say the one in my hand because it changes.
You got it. So barrel aged, imperial, or both?
I love my barrels. Like my brewing hat loves putting stuff in different barrels and getting that characteristic and those vanilla. The barrel age, the people out there love them, but there's a lot of people that don't like them. So
Right.
my brewing hat says yes, my business hat says no.
Gotcha. You have one keg of beer to hold you over for a 2-week quarantine. Which beer are you choosing?
Probably my hazy would be my go-to. Just to have one keg of beer for 2 weeks.
Awesome. Well, Tyler, that's all I have for you, man.
Great, man. This has been fun.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate it. I'm Mike Curtin for the Brew World Order podcast with Tyler Jones of Black Hog Brewing Company in Oxford, Connecticut. Thanks, man. Hey guys, thank you so much for listening to my interview with Tyler Jones, co-owner of Black Hog Brewing Company in Oxford, Connecticut. Whether you're passing through, you live in the area, or just visiting a friend nearby, you should definitely check them out. Also, give them a follow on social media. Every other Sunday I'll be releasing a new episode, so subscribe and you'll never miss one. Also, be sure to check us out on social media because, hey man, why not? I'm Mike Curtin for the Brew World Order podcast. You stay safe out there.